folks. Veritopia is all about science, alchemy, natural law and shamanic paganism. These things are really all the same and lead in the same direction, towards the great work of liberation from the Wheel of Incarnation. And this is true freedom. Polytheism, pantheism and animism are basically all correct. Reality is made of a hierarchy of ideas. I've called this the universal plan, but I'm sure it's had many names in the past. It's Brahma's dream. So the thesis of this video is that the real gods of nature are the conceptual framework of reality, which exists in the mind of the creator. So gods are concepts. Some are real and some aren't. The concept of truth, for example, is real and it exists outside the minds of men, in the mind of the creator, the one. Truth is the concept which contains the whole of reality. Reality and truth are synonymous. God is truth and truth is one. There's only one reality, but there are countless false realities living like leeches in the minds of men. The primary false ideologies, called sins by the religions, only exist in the minds of men, and not in the mind of God. They're the false gods, the enemy, and also the teacher. For example, anger, which is a sin, is the belief that your will should be followed by others. It's linked to pride, as you feel you're justified in forcing your will on someone else. It's also projection, because you can only get angry with yourself. If you actually observe your anger, you will see that. The process of science and personal enlightenment is to find out which concepts exist in reality, i.e. in God's mind, and which only exist in the minds of men. And you have to do this for yourself. And this post is about the real ones, the ones which exist in the mind of God, and not so much in the mind of men these days. All concepts are made of spirit, not matter. They live in minds. They're immortal and they are omnipresent. The concept of logic exists throughout the universe. They determine how reality functions. They are the laws of nature. The laws of nature are concepts. They're not made of matter. And the only question is, perhaps, are they sentient and self-aware? Well, animism says that everything is alive, it's all made of God and God is life, and this follows naturally from God being one. And everything created has free will. So, the implication is pretty strong that, the concepts themselves do have free will. It's hard to imagine how that is, but, maybe we'll get there in time. Reality is made of spirit, concepts and the relationships between them, and they form a natural hierarchy. And I've called it the universal plan, and we're going to see that now. So the names of the gods, the examples I've given, are not a complete list. They're not meant to be. There are thousands of names for most of these gods. They're just an example to give you, the idea. And the 7 principles they're aligned with contain a huge amount of information. They link this to a wealth, a library of information to explain them and give them character and all sorts of things. That's what the universal plan does, putting everything into this 7 category thing. In this instance, anyway, there's a 7-part, there's the 4 elements, there's the Tao. Depending on which level of reality you're looking at, you need to put it into the right categorization. But it's not that complicated anyway. So there's no way I could have fitted in all the correspondences here, so I've just put in a few. The universal plan follows the pattern of the human body, because everything follows this form. There's nothing that doesn't. It's the universal plan. So to break it down, we have the 4 elements here. We have fire, air, water and earth. And in between those, we have what I call creation centres, where one gets mixed into the other. Sorry about the tractor out there. So in between fire and air, we have fire plus air, which is voice. And that's when your will is mixed with the air. And it makes sound and you tell people what your will is. It's quite simple. Heart is a mixture of air and water. It sits in between the lungs and the stomach. And sex is a mixture of water and earth. Sex brings earth into motion. That's why people say, did the earth move for you, love? So, this gives us basically 7 levels of reality, and there are gods in each. Some have one, some have more than one. So at the very top level we have God, or Odin, which means one, and it is will, desire, and it's good. So desire plus good is love. This is the prime creator. It's one, it's God, Brahma, Vishnu, grandfather, God the Father. But the principle these concepts represent are love, truth, life, and consciousness. So I suppose, God contains all of those concepts. They're all part of God: love, truth, life, consciousness, all that stuff. And the principle itself is really what the name is getting at. So the principle is more important than the name, because the principle is the purpose, it's the character of the God. So there's our top God, there's Odin. Our second level is Christ, it's the avatar, it's the God made flesh. So this is God the Son. And it corresponds to logic and free will and choice. So voice makes will into law, as I've said. So it's the voice of God. It's the Son of God, it's the realised man, and it's the dragon slayer as well, because it's logic, the sharp sword of logic, that kills the dragon of ideology. One thing to note is that all of these 7 principles correspond to these 7 question words, because we have 7 question words and we have 7 parts of speech, which is evidence that this is correct. And not only do they fit very, very perfectly. So fire is why, it's the purpose, it's the reason why you do stuff, and it's the prime creator. Logic is which is how you choose between 2 things. So yeah, that's logic, all right. And we get down to the third level, which is air. It corresponds to the lungs in its knowledge and nature. That's the principle behind it, and it's the Tao. It's goddess Yin and God Yang. Yin is false, Yang is true, and together they form Mother Nature. And the air level of the 4 elements corresponds to law, path, and design. It's the Tao. It's Tu in the Norse myth. It's Tu. It's Zeus. It's the archetype of knowledge and law. It's true and false. It's day and night. Yin is dark. It's a passive evil. It's Satan, the adversary. And it's the goddess, the moon, Luna. And Yang is light, good, truth. And it's God and Son. At the heart level of reality, we have time. And it corresponds to the question when. This is the Cronus, or the Holy Spirit kind of archetype. And time makes law into action. That's what it does. Law is your path, it's your design. Say you're going to build a house, and it's time that will allow you to bring it into action. And action is the next element. So yeah, the next element is water, and it corresponds to work, power, motion, action. And it's Thor, because it's the 4. It's 4 elements. Thor is 4. And it, like I say, it corresponds to the principle of work and also duty. So it's the who question. The water level also corresponds to sound, the sine wave. And Thor is the thunderer, so he is sound. At the sex level, where our genitals sit, of reality, we have creativity. And it's bringing earth into motion, as I was saying. So when you create a child, you're taking some food, which is earth, and you're bringing it into motion by creating a child with it. And then there is earth animated by life, which is a miracle. And it corresponds to gods like Eros, Venus, and Easter. It has obviously male and female part to it. And our legs correspond to the earth level of reality. It's matter, it's the what, it's the position, the venue, the location, the setting, it's the reward, and it's wealth, and it's also the afterlife, and it's overseen by Freya, certainly in the Norse. Gaia may be really better considered to be Mother Nature up here in the air section, but I don't know. But this is the 7 days, so the earth level of matter is this exact plan. This is the 7 days. So this is a fractal. This system is a fractal tree, and this is the tree of life, because within each of these elements you can have another layer of all of these elements again. So under air can have its own will and its own matter, and so on. Yeah. So it makes an interesting but highly categorized and useful system nonetheless. Anyway, so the gods are gendered. And the gender of any god is determined by its relationship to something else, because that's how all gender is determined. So gods may be seen as masculine or feminine, depending on your point of view. But it doesn't mean it's arbitrary, it means we have to be clear about our perspective and which relationship we're attempting to describe. But in general, yang masculine is the provider and yin feminine is the receiver. So the creator, God, is always masculine because he only provides and he doesn't receive anything. He's the perfect archetype of yang, the provider. Logic, the sun, is also masculine because logic is yang tool of nature. It's outside of nature, it's part of the creator. And it provides for the Tao, which are nature. So nature is the mother. It's both yin and yang. It forms our bodies and we suckle at nature's teat. The suckling mother represents the balance between yin and yang. It's a really good symbol of it. She's yin to the father, the mother, who provides for her, but she's yang to the infant, who she provides for. And by providing the child for the father, she becomes yang to him in that relationship. Thus the Tao is balanced. So the mother is the epitome of the balance of nature. But there's more. It's a very complex relationship. Nature doesn't just provide for us, it receives something extremely powerful and valuable from us. We're not just passive receivers of nature, we provide something it needs to function, which is our attention. So anyway, our relationship with nature is quite complex. Goddess Yin is the adversary, so she's the prime archetype of matter. She is Satan, the Satan archetype, because matter is the test of spirits. That's why matter exists, it's to test spirits. That's why we're here. And she is passive evil, the darkness, the shadow. So passive evil, a shadow isn't evil, it's just a lack of sunlight. So we have to change our understanding of evil. There's no real evil in this scheme. Anyway, I'll get on to that. Anyway, Goddess Yin is the enchantress. She is the archetype of magic and illusion. She's chaos, she's lawlessness, and she's the void also. Goddess element earth, so the double yin. So Goddess Yin is a single yin, she's the mother, or the grandmother perhaps. And then we have the element earth, which is a double yin, part of the four elements. And she would be the archetype of autumn, which is dissolution and destruction, because in the autumn everything changes from being alive to being dead, and by the end of the autumn everything's dead. So she's Kali the destroyer, and she's also the goddess of the harvest. So the god Thor, the four elements, are the archetype of power, work and justice. They could either be male or female, I would have thought, because you could look at it as containing 3 masculine and 1 feminine aspects, or vice versa, depending on which way you look at it. I wouldn't be surprised that there were some traditions out there where there was a female goddess who had the power, Fertility would probably have both a god and a goddess, because obviously it takes 2 to tango, and I think that is normally what you find in most traditions. But this isn't necessarily just referring to reproduction, but to any creative enterprise, because it's the centre of creation. And we have a god or goddess of time, perhaps. Time is yang to us, but it has both yang and yin forms, which I talked about in another video. I can't remember which one offhand. People talk about the 4 faces of the goddess. This is a kind of, or at least the 3 faces of the goddess. This is a kind of common thing in paganism. I would offer the possibility that there are 4, and they correspond to the 4 seasons from the sine wave, following the yin pattern. And water, which is winter, is the child, it's the beginning. So the beginning of the year is winter, and it's when you have very little light. It's dark, but it's getting lighter, so it's an upward trend. So this is the beginning, it's the child, and the child is sexless. It has both male and female attributes, and it would probably apply to both male and female humans. The next season is spring, which is fire. It's light and it's getting lighter, so that's ++. It's the maiden, it's Venus the Virgin, it's the building up. Air and summer is mother, so it's the suckling mother, it's it's nature and nurture, it's nurturing. And then earth and autumn, as I said before, it's the crone from Cronus, which is time, aged, and it's Kali, it's the breaking down. And perhaps the old triune goddess exists because the child is kind of sexless, basically, and or maybe it's not considered an active principle of femininity. Yeah. So we have the four elements, and they tell us that there's probably four aspects of mind, and so these are what they are. Fire is will, it's the desire. Air is logic and understanding, so it's logos and Tao, it's logic and knowledge. Water is thought, it's the process of thinking, so the process of applying logic. And then there's earth, which is your memory. And earth is solid and fixed, it's like stones, and memories are very much like stones that you build upon. So that's how to think of it. And the process of forming a mind goes from earth to fire, because it's yin to yang. It's going from nescience, which is no knowledge, to science, which is knowledge. And it's also the same process as solving a problem, because it is the same thing. So you start off at the earth level with memory. So stage one is to store information. You just get as much information about the problem as you can, and you store it in your memory. Stage two is to compare, refine and reject. It's water, it's thought. You have to find the inconsistencies in the information you've collected, so you slosh it around and you see how bits compare against each other. The air level is logic and understanding, and it's stage three, so we arrange the information into a logical structure of right and wrong. And this is the analysis that we build up from the information. And then finally, the fire stage is to decide what you do about it. This is the analysis I've made, and so this is the course of action, the direction I feel I should take. So this is how you form a will. So I'm suggesting that the four elements in the 7-day structure is A, real objective fact of nature, and it's the real theory of everything. It's B, the original religion and science and language of the whole world, because this does lead on to a perfect language, although that's a way away from me yet. And C, most traditional gods are derived from this system, and it was once very commonly known. As I say, it was worldwide. These things really exist, so logic really exists and truth exists outside of our minds. Memory isn't something that just happens in human minds, it exists in matter too. The imprint of the past exists in the present, in matter, just as it does in mind. Books, art, architecture, they're all memories of the past that are cast in matter. And death isn't just a human concept, it's a principle, just as is life. These concepts are the gods which provide the structure of the universe. Life and death are universal concepts and laws which apply to all matter. They're sentient, self-aware, and they have free will, because everything does. They're real living creatures made from mind, which is fire and air. And so this is why you have creatures made of fire in various traditions, like the Islamic jinn. The gods are not mystical, unknowable, and unprovable superstitions. They are the mundane and everyday conceptual framework our reality exists within. We all know the gods, it's just people don't realise what they are. People don't know what's right in front of them. Just as a story needs the framework of language in order to be told, so does our story. There has to be a framework or mechanism by which reality is able to exist. But it can't be made of matter, because matter exists within that framework. Matter is the venue, it's here to help us play out something, a spiritual archetype. Science has been supposedly searching for this mechanism for centuries, but it was never hidden. It's simply made of ideas held in the mind of God, and their ideology, i.e. the jealous God, because ideology is the jealous God, it wouldn't allow them to see that. Ideology makes you blind. People are ideological atheists to the bone. They've really sold their souls to the devil when they do that. Anyway, so there's no room in this scheme for active evil, and passive evil isn't really evil. Darkness, night, shadow, illusion, they aren't necessarily bad. If they persist, they might be though. Too much yin can definitely be evil, e.g. a year of night would be a disaster. But yin can't become dominant on her own because she's passive and she has to be enabled by yang. She's the shadow, yang's the light. So active evil is something that humans manifest. It can only come through us. Nature is perfectly balanced. It's a perfect balance of yin and yang. It's us who are unbalanced. And we're tricked into doing evil as part of the test of life by the 7 sins, which is a pagan concept, I believe. You could call these the prime demonic ideologies. They're goddess Yin's demons, the true vampires that have to be invited in. They are the mind parasites that use people as puppets. Ideologies are false but sentient, jealous gods, fiercely competing with each other for resources, i.e. human lives, human brains to live in. They use people as their instruments for their own selfish purposes. They feed from people's minds, eating them from the inside out, like a spiritual parasitoid larvae. I really don't think I'm exaggerating. Ideologies destroy civilizations and souls. They've murdered hundreds of millions of people in the last 100 years. They are the active evil, and it's enabled by people. We are the force of evil in the world. We are Satan. we are the Satan we seek to destroy. People have to abandon the false gods and return to humility to the real gods. That's the only way. Because they are the real dragons that we have to slay, and we have to slay them within ourselves. Everything else will follow naturally, and there is no other solution. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll catch you later.